And now, Michigan Reimagined with Chris Buck.
So there's been a lot of discussion about the loss of vibrancy and economic development momentum due to coronavirus. But in Lansing, there's a sizable development project coming out of the ground as we speak called the Red Cedar. And here to give us an update and some background on this massive development is the Executive Project Manager of Ferguson Development, Christopher Stralkowski. Welcome, Christopher.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
Oh, thanks for being here. It's very exciting. I get the privilege of driving by this project every day, and I don't think I've driven by it at any time of day or night where I haven't seen people working. So congratulations on keeping the momentum strong.
Thank you. We've been very fortunate, even with the pandemic and all the things that have been taking place, both socially, physically, as well as economically, that we've been on track, if not a little ahead of schedule.
Awesome.
Very fortunate.
Yeah, no kidding. And I think there are a lot of people out there that are not as fortunate. So,
no question.
But let's talk about that stuff. So for those not familiar, where is the Red Cedar project located and who's the development team?
Sure. So if you're familiar with Lansing, we have the Michigan Avenue terminates into the Michigan State Capitol building in downtown Lansing. And then that road extends out east, going through several municipalities, and right on the edge between Lansing and East Lansing, right across from Frandor, is the former Lansing-owned, city-operated Red Cedar Golf Course, which was a 9-hole golf course back in the day. It's got a great history, was around for almost 100 years, and it was actually lit up at night to allow the second and third shifts from Oldsmobile and Fisher Body to play golf.
Really?
Yeah, and when it was open, it was $8. A lot of the holes, especially towards the riverside, were always wet because of the saturation from the river.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you're familiar with this. Cities shouldn't be running golf courses, and it was one of those decisions that was made. I believe it was 2009 to shut down the course and figure out something different. And an RFP was issued, and that was, I think, 2011. So That's where we sort of got in. And at that time, there were 3 or 4 proposals, pretty much targeted housing, specifically student housing. There was a big wave back then to start producing a new product. Lansing and East Lansing, the existing student housing projects were dated. They were older. The students nowadays, the expectations, I'm not sure about you, but I shared a bedroom and a bathroom back when I was at Central Michigan and my other attempts at college, and everybody now gets their own bathroom, and
right.
It's a completely different model. And safety wasn't so much an issue, which it has become now. Parents tend to be a little bit more. I was a school teacher. They were helicopter parents. They wanted to make sure everything was, right by their son or daughters, which is great. I'm a parent too, and I wanted that as well. But it's just a different market now. It's more costly. But it also is more defined, as opposed to 4 guys signing a lease and figuring out who gets what bedroom and where to park the car and not get a fine from the city of East Lansing for having beer cups in your front yard.
Understandable. Okay, so this was an RFP response that went out, and you were the successful proposal that got chosen.
Yep. And so any project, and again we're talking 2011, went through many different iterations in terms of cost, in terms of programming. And we initially started this with Leo and Chris Jerome with the RFP. We weren't able to sort of make that partnership work. And at that point in time, we were able to create a relationship with Frank Cass out of Columbus, Ohio, with Continental Real Estate Companies.
Okay.
So both Joel Ferguson here in Lansing at Ferguson Development and Frank Cass of Continental created a partnership, which is what resulted in the Red Cedar development and the former golf course.
Okay, so you won the RFP and you didn't start swinging hammers right away. It sounds like there's a couple of hurdles to clear. Talk a little bit about that.
Sure. Well, this is the sausage making of real estate development. So what you have is a grand concept in mind, especially with a mixed use. It's much different than a single use building. We were challenged in a couple of ways. Financially, we were challenged on the site because it's located in the floodplain and in the floodway.
Okay.
You're not allowed to develop or build any permanent structures in the floodway. That being said, you take that site and you split it in 2, so you have part of the site that is actually in a floodway, which actually means water is actually flowing underground, and then the floodplain, which is where you will see our development, which is about a 33-acre development. So we were presented with this creative challenge of trying to figure out how to build structures in a floodplain dealing with 10, 15, 20-year flood events, which I'm sure if people are around Lansing and Red Cedar, the Sycamore, as well as the Grand River, there's quite a bit of activity in the spring with the snowmelt and the elevated levels of water. So that created a challenge for us to present to the DNR at that time, or excuse me, the DEQ, which is now Eagle. So we worked with our engineers and our team, and at the same time, what's occurring in this particular area is the redesign as rebuilt for the Montgomery drain, which is an Ingham County drain.
Yep.
That being said, they were faced with the exact same issues we were faced with, was how do you redesign, how do you construct something in the floodplain, in the floodway? He's allowed to, we're not. I know, he's special that way, the drain commissioner. However, we were sort of, no joke, but we were in the boat together. So how are we going to manage and work within these challenges? And we probably spent, I'm sure there was more time, but we probably spent 6 months of meetings of, 8 to 10 to 12 people in the room with the, the DEQ, with their flood experts, with the people that, deal with this, the fluvial physics people and the stream morphology people and all the people that understand the dynamics of water and different types of things. And we were able to come up with a solution, and that was what we refer to as a compensating cut, which means for every bucket of dirt that you dig out and fill in with, your foundation, you have to compensate it somewhere else in the watershed. And the Red Cedar actually begins up in Williamstown Township, which is probably about 20 miles up the road if you just stayed on Michigan Avenue and stayed on Grand River and went past Okemos. And that being said, our challenge was to find where we could find a nice piece of property to create this compensating cut. And we were successful, and that was very important to the project because that allowed the DNR and the DEQ, in this case both, along with the drain commissioner, along with our team, to be able to move forward because we could prove scientifically, mathematically, that we were not harming the flow or increasing the level of the Red Cedar, which obviously is a danger to everyone that's along there in terms of flooding.
So is the ultimate solution going to be better than it was before?
No question. No question.
Okay, so it's an improvement at the same time.
Yeah. So if you think about the way that this particular river worked, and actually the biggest challenge to this river was when they built the bridge on 496, because that inhibits the flow of the water. Sort of like in a bathtub. You put something big and wide in the middle of the bathtub, it disperses the water and doesn't allow the water to move, and it artificially raises it. Pat Linderman's drain project is working to slow the flow of the water into the Red Cedar at this particular location, as well as what we're doing is we're working with the drain office as well as other people that are in that particular drain district area to create retention and detention ponds, which right now it's a motobahn. I mean, the water is just flowing as fast as it can into there and creating these flood events, and they're flash flood events quite often.
Okay. Yep. Well, that's great background, but the project itself is so exciting from what I understand. So share with the audience, what are people going to see? This isn't just a student housing complex. There's a lot of components to this.
Yes.
Share with us what that is.
Sure. It's truly a mixed use development, no question. We have a component of student housing. We also have some market rate housing units that are right on the corner of Clippard and Michigan Avenue across from Frandor. We're constructing 2 hotels. One is a full-service hotel. The other is a select-service hotel. Along with the market rate housing, we'll have retail, which would include potentially commercial, restaurants, maybe some salons, maybe dentists, those types of tenants we would look forward to having there. And then we also have a senior piece, which is a non-insurance-based senior project, which our research and our market studies indicated there's a severe shortage in this area. Grand Rapids, not so much. Ann Arbor, not so much. But in the Lansing or in the Tri-County region, there is not a lot of non-insurance-based senior where you can visit your aunt, your uncles, and you have a salon, you have a barbershop, you might have a movie theater or a restaurant. So it's a higher-end product. And if you think about the legacy of sort of Michigan State and this area, people tend to want to stay in this area. They're very loyal.
Yes, no question. Yep. No question.
Yep. So, I mean, we looked at it again. We're going over an 8-year process. Where's that sweet spot? How do you not build not enough, and how do you build not too many?
Right.
And I will be the first, and Joel Ferguson will be as well, to say that we leaned on Frank Cass very much for that, because he's done $3 billion worth of mixed use and different types of properties all over the United States. So his expertise And then Joel's charisma and Joel's personality, it was a perfect fit. It was a marriage made in heaven. So,
that's great.
Yeah.
So now how big is this going to be? It seems like this is going to be its own village because you're going to have obviously a bunch of different age bracketed people by definition, and then of shopping and restaurants and all that stuff.
Yeah. It was definitely started off, and this was Bob Tresice's vision here in Lansing at LEAP, and he talked about it being a global village, that he wanted this to be diverse, not only in terms of different types of people from different regions, different countries, but he also wanted it to be multi-generational. And that was one of our focuses because we recognize that if you can attract students that can interact with people your and my age, as well as, people that are older with the senior piece, that you're going to create this dynamic. And we look at it as a village. And I don't want us to be an island unto itself, but where we're located, we sort of are. But we've got connectivity. We've got connectivity across the street at Frandor. There's going to be a redesign of how you transition from one side of the from Michigan Avenue. We've gotten lucky though, because Michigan Avenue used to be extremely traveled.
Yeah.
And for some reason, recently, within the last 5 years, the traffic, and they've narrowed it. They've taken a lane out. So it's going to be a lot more pedestrian as well as bicycle friendly for those types of interactions.
Yep.
And we're also connected to the Lansing River Trail, which is the 55 mile trail that travels all around the region. And that's very important to us because along with the retention and detention areas, we're going to have walking paths. So we're going to have those connections that people in this generation, in this day and age, appreciate because it's both active and passive. You can go out and sit and listen to the birds and feed the ducks and do things like that, but you can also jog, you can bike, you can walk, you can do all of those things. So that's a big deal.
And I've seen renderings of this and what it's going to look like, and the connection. I mean, straight over to Harrison. I mean, you're at the Breslin Center, right?
Yes.
So these hotels, should ring the bell. I would imagine on home games for football and basketball. I can see it just being a green and white village and masses of people walking from this compound over to the campus for all kinds of stuff, whether it's concerts and music and arts, but also the athletics. I mean, this is really going to be something special.
And one of the things that we wanted to emphasize because of us being on the border between Michigan and State, East Lansing and Lansing, is the idea that this is also a regional piece because we're located right along the corridor of 127. So that's very traveled. People going up north, people live in St. John's, as well as the people that live in Lansing. And if we think about state government, we think about the various industries that we have here, especially insurance is huge.
Right.
And you create this, conference space. You create this higher end product that Lansing did not have. This will be the only full service hotel in the region. We were told stories before when we were making these proposals that if you brought in maybe a future CEO of the accident fund, or you were trying to attract high talent, they would send them to Grand Rapids and spend the night in Grand Rapids or Ann Arbor because there was not a full service hotel in this region. Now, recently we've brought online some hotels. I think at Eastwood there's been 4 or 5 that have come on. But again, those are select service hotels. We have a select service hotel, which is targeted towards, sort of a business person who spends 2 or 3 days maybe in conferences at Michigan State, at the Capitol, lobbying, those types of things. But then you also had, to your point, you're coming up for your son or your daughter's graduation. You're coming up to the Duke-Michigan State basketball game. You're coming up to the Ohio State football game, which at this point, and this is for Frank, you took it to us this year. You got us. But needless to say, it has been a lot of fun. And it's funny that I mentioned that because throughout the process of this particular project, the 4, 5, 6 years that we've been going, it's been pretty tight between Michigan State and Ohio State football.
Right.
And we've gone down there and we've won. And obviously they've come up here and they've won. And then we beat them in the championship. And there was some, we were waiting to see if Frank was going to return our phone calls.
Well, you guys are tied together with a project bigger than sports, but it's amazing how big that gets.
Yeah. Second favorite team, the Buckeyes.
So talk about the pandemic. You mentioned how fortunate you are that things are still moving, but it must have affected you somehow.
Well, it was amazing, obviously, how quickly it came on. There's no question. I don't think anybody could have anticipated the gravity and the effects and the immediacy of all of a sudden being shut down. That being said, we were able to, in projects like this, you don't get financing once you start construction. Obviously, your financing is locked in before you begin your constructions, your incentives, your TIFs, and all of those taxes and all the things that you put together for a project like this were in place. So we were fortunate in that aspect because obviously things are different now in COVID. And that being said, we were in the shutdown that Governor Whitmer, rightfully so, put onto construction in Michigan to slow the spread. And I believe it was in early spring.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah.
It was like a 4 or 5, maybe even a 6 week. And so we did what we needed to do, which was then to step back, and this is Continental Building Companies, who's our GC, our general contractor, and they put the right policies in place, the right procedures in place, that once things were able to, re-engage, that we were following those guidelines. One of the aspects that we were very fortunate, because at that time we were only working on, at that point, our first phase of student housing. And in Indiana, they didn't have a shutdown. So these panels were being constructed in Indiana, and they kept constructing them, and they just inventoried them. So as soon as we were able to start again, they were able to just ship them up here, and we were able to play catch up. So we got very fortunate. So it wasn't the old days where you got the hammer and the nail and you were doing that. Almost like a puzzle piece.
Right.
Big Lego pieces. So it was we were very fortunate.
Well, we could talk for a long time, and unfortunately we're running late, but I do want to knock on a couple things. So when is this coming online? When are people moving in?
Fall of 2021, third quarter. So we're good there. And, I just want to make sure, because you had this on the sheet that you sent me, I want to make sure that this was absolutely an effort on many people's part to be successful. I had 2 mayors. I had 3 councils. I had community groups. I had charrettes. I had council members. Everyone should have a pat on the back. LEAP, Bob Tresice, everyone.
That's fantastic. You can go to redcedarfacts.com if you want to learn more about this project. We've been talking to Executive Project Manager of Ferguson Development, Christopher Stralkowski. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you very much, Chris.